This is Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
All right, Jonathan, we're digging into religious controversies for this show. I like springing these topics on you.
I enjoy
completely off the cuff. I found an interesting thing. And John Gerardi here, by the way, the executive director of Right to Life of Central California, joined, as always, by my good buddy Jonathan Keller, the CEO of California Family Council. Jonathan, how the heck are you?
As well as could be expected. I think we're still in this kind of never-ending limbo of election purgatory where everything is all up in the air. But
it's not that up in the air. Not to belabor a point made on the John Gerardi show, but I think it's kind of over. So anyway, don't now.
You hear the fat lady warming up?
The fat lady is at the very least warming up. So before you throw full cups of coffee at your radios, understand this is not me saying I want the election to go one way or another. This is just, and frankly, whether I am enthusiastic for Trump's chances or not to pull this out has actually no impact on whether or not he pulls it out.
You're saying that Rudy Giuliani citing our favorite Supreme Court justice's favorite movie?
My cousin Vinny.
That might not have been a good sign for Trump's election chances.
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani was a great lawyer and was a great federal prosecutor and is not. It's like one of those pitchers who they used to have like a 96 mile per hour fastball, but now it's like down to about 89. That seems to be what's going on with Rudy. Anyway, now that I've completely alienated all of our listeners, let's dig into the topic. So this is Right to Life Radio. We discuss a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org, and we're discussing abortion policy. And I want to talk about this issue that It comes up often enough and is now a little controversy in one of the Georgia Senate races. In one of the Georgia Senate races, one of the two Georgia, by the way, so Georgia, the way their elections work, if you don't get a majority on election night, then you have a runoff where the top two vote getters square off again in an election that's going to take place on January 5th. I believe. Is that correct, Jonathan? January 5th is when the Georgia runoffs are?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is the same. They're one of those weird states. There's very few states that do this. The only one that I think immediately comes to mind
Doesn't Louisiana do it? Yeah.
Where instead of having a primary, they do this crazy
totally open
jungle primary, and if you get 50%, then you're 50% plus
then you
one,
win.
you're in, and if not, then you do the runoff.
Now we do the jungle primary in California, but we do the jungle primary on primary day, and then whoever the top two vote getters are, they go on to win. Anyway, so they're going to have their Senate election on January 5th for both of their Senate seats. And in one of the Senate seats, one of the people running is a pastor, Rafael
Warnock.
Warnock? There we go. Makes me think of Wario. Ha-ha, it's a me, Wario. Ralph Warnock is a pastor, he's a minister, and he is very pro-choice. And
so pro-choice that he tweeted about, I'm a pro-choice minister.
I'm a pro-choice pastor. I'm a pro-choice pastor. I'm a pro-choice minister.
Oy vey.
And this has resulted in a lot of people bringing up this certain point that I find really annoying and obnoxious, and it's a point of sort of pro-life contention that it's worth, we'll educate all of you on this topic. What do you do when someone says to you, well, Jesus, and this is sort of an intra-Christian question, so for you non-Christians out there, I apologize if this will make you stultifyingly bored, but guess what? Like, this is, for these kinds of abortion questions, there are a lot of Christians who raise this objection. And I think it's important for those of us who are pro-life to understand it and to be able to respond to it. So the objection frequently is made, and I've seen a number of people make this objection in defense of Rafael Warnock. Well, Jesus never said anything about abortion. Jesus never said anything about abortion. Ergo, abortion is either not important or morally permissible or what have you, or just up for everyone to decide for themselves individually, whatever the case may be. Because Jesus had nothing to say about the legality, whether or not abortion should be legal, therefore, it means all bets are off or no holds barred. So, Jonathan, let's talk about other topics that Jesus did not discuss. Firebombing innocent civilians.
That's true.
Preemptive nuclear strikes.
It's true.
Chemical weapons against use of chemical weapons against civilians.
Bans on firearms.
Bans on fire. Yeah, the use of firearms in any which way.
Government-funded health care.
Exactly. So there's this argument from. I guess I'm not sure what an argument from ignorance or an argument from
silence.
From silence.
Is what I've heard
That's what it is. There's this argument from silence that because Jesus didn't talk about abortion specifically, that therefore Christianity has little or nothing to say about the matter. Now, this almost feels like a species of so-called red letter Christianity. The notion that we only look at the stuff Jesus said, and those parts, the stuff that Jesus said in the Bible, that stuff is highlighted in red, and everything else is of, I guess, secondary importance as compared to stuff that Jesus himself literally said.
Yes.
So it's kind of a species of that, and maybe that's a different discussion for a different show.
No, but I think that's a fair thing, John. There is. I think it's especially prevalent in some forms of postmodern Christianity. There's actually a movement that is called.
You're the Protestant on the show,
All
so
right.
I'm giving you. I'm free reign to discuss this intra-Protestant phenomenon.
There is
I'm just a completely ignorant Catholic.
Among some Protestants, evangelicals especially, there is kind of this subset of new people that in the last 10 or 20 years, maybe 30 years, have said, "Oh no, I don't like to get bogged down in all the Pauline epistles,
all that negativity from that Paul guy.
Come on,
what a downer St. Paul is,
man. I just like to read the Gospels, man. I just like to read, the words of Jesus. I'm a red letter Christian.
Yeah. Okay.
And
by
that,
the tone you're adopting is sort of indicating what you think about this position as it relates to Orthodox Christianity.
Yes, I would argue and say that it's true that the words of Jesus are very important. But the thing that I always think, John, that is just kind of funny, whenever you hear people talk about some certain issue, whether it is the pro-life issue or LGBT issues or whatever it is,
right.
A lot of times we'll hear people say,
well, Jesus didn't talk about...
Yes.
Jesus didn't say...
Yeah. X, Y, or Z.
Jesus didn't oppose gay marriage.
And I kind of remind people, I'm like, are we all familiar with the Trinity here? And the idea that...
Right. Well, yeah, Jesus also did not mention the Trinity, and yet that's a pretty foundation... Well, and that's... So let's dig into this concept. All right. Did Jesus talk about abortion? Well, no, if you want to do a control F of the Bible for the word abortion, no, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find Jesus talking about it. As Jonathan goes to his phone to do a control F of the Bible.
That's right.
You're not going to find the word abortion there. Now, does that mean that Christianity has nothing to say on the topic of abortion? Manifestly, the answer to that question is no. First of all, just looking at the Bible itself. I'm not even getting into the Didache here. I'm just looking at the Bible itself. All right. We'll get to that in a second. Just looking at the Bible itself, there are a number of points in the Bible where we can discern and understand, first and foremost, the basic concept that human life is extremely, extremely valuable, that there is a certain fundamental equality, in a certain sense, to all human life, which prohibits individuals from taking it.
Yes.
Individuals from taking the life of innocent human persons. There's a grave injustice involved there. There's this thing called a commandment. There were 10 of them, in fact, which said, "Thou shalt not kill." I don't know if you're familiar with those, Jonathan. There were 10 of these.
I mean, it seems like a good idea, but John, I don't know if we can really say those are, because they weren't written in red letters. So
they weren't written in red letter. They were etched onto tablets,
literally by the finger of God.
By the finger of God himself, until Moses until no, was it Moses? Yeah, Moses.
Yeah.
Until Moses got so angry,
Smashed
Which
him.
reminds me of the Mel Brooks movie. I bring you these 15, and then he drops one of the 3 tablets.
10.
10 commandments. Yeah. Anyway, so the principle that human life is sacred, and that you can't deliberately kill innocent human life in an unprovoked way, and that human life has value in a way that is fundamentally equal, is one of the great contributions of the Judeo-Christian religion to the world. This notion that people who are small and unimportant and poor and women and children and orphans and outsiders politically or racially, or strangers or sojourners or whatever, that all of those people actually do have value, and that in fact society is judged by how it treats the widows and the orphans and the small. That this is an incredibly novel concept that Judaism brought to the world, and which was spread to the whole world by Christianity coming out of Judaism. So this notion that the Bible has nothing to say about abortion, when one, it very clearly values human life. We know that unborn children are living human persons, therefore you should not take their lives. It's not exactly rocket science to figure out that the Bible does have something fairly straightforward to say about the value and dignity of human life, and thus about the whether abortion is something morally justifiable or good. Furthermore, beyond that, you can even go into slightly more literal passages where, I think in various parts of the Old Testament, where God talks about, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and that I breathed life into you in your mother's womb, and all kinds of stuff from the Old Testament that seem to indicate strongly that something is going on inside a mother's womb before a child is actually born. So we got that. Then, in addition to that, maybe I'll save the entire history of Christianity after the Bible for the next segment.
Yes.
Just to have, the next
Some
2,000
balance.
years, just to have the next 2,000 years outside of the Bible. But in short, it shows this sort of argument, this defense. And by the way, for this guy running for Senate in Georgia, we're not taking a position one way or another. We're criticizing this one thing that is being said in defense of him.
Let me take off my hat, John, of a 501c3 director.
Mm-hmm.
I just as a Christian person, I want to just read you. This is his page. If you
This
go
is
to
Rafael Warnock,
Rafael
the
Warnock.
man who's running for Senate
Yes.
in Georgia.
You go to
This
Reverend.
pro-choice pastor who's running for Senate in Georgia.
Yeah, he is at Reverend Warnock on Twitter, and his little header image says, "Your vote is sacred. Text vote to 52005," and then so he's talking about
So your vote is sacred.
your vote is sacred,
But
and this is what he said here. Let me see if I can read it to you. He's been asked about, what is your opinion about this? You're running against Kelly. What is her name? Kelly Loeffler.
Kelly Loeffler.
He says, I'm a pro-choice pastor, and I believe that a hospital room is way too small for a woman, her doctor, and the United States government.
Which is ridiculous, first of all.
Apparently, John, he doesn't think that there should be any
So
state standards of
that's the thing.
licensure or
Yeah.
safety requirements
Also,
for
let's
doctors.
understand this is just sort of a bizarre rhetorical device to act as though the United States government takes up space. I mean, the United
Yes.
States government is present in this room to ensure that I don't, stab you.
Yep.
Or that I don't, punch producer Rafael
Yep.
or tackle producer George over there. There's plenty of room for the United States government in literally any room if it comes to a question of protecting people's fundamental basic human dignity. And it's yet another sort of silly argument basing itself in some notion that, the government, I just don't want the government involved in the question. When really what you're doing is you're abandoning a whole segment of the human population to, unprovoked acts of violence against itself. All right. So we've dealt with this as a biblical thing. Let's talk about it from the whole history of Christianity subsequently.
Yep.
We'll dig into that right after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. All right, Mr. Jonathan.
What's the deal with this hip new music?
Well, it's not hip new music. This is just what's on the live stream on the YouTube channel so that YouTube doesn't take down the videos. Actually, on the radio, we have groovy
Different
60s and 70s music.
Okay.
As we always do. But you're hearing the live stream to YouTube, not the live stream on the radio, which is live.
Folks, that is called pulling back the curtain. You're
That's pulling back the curtain.
Some
Yes.
insider
info there.
That's right.
Anyway, Right to Life Radio, as always, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Hey, our Christmas dinner and auction's coming up Friday, December 4th. You can watch the whole thing from our YouTube channel. It's going to be streamed live, and you can bid on stuff. That's right. Go to rtlcc.org. You can register for watching it. Basically, that just means we'll send you an email with a link to the YouTube page. And you can also register to bid. We're going to have a nice silent auction with a whole bunch of silent auction items. We'll have, what else will we have? We'll have a live auction, too, with a couple of really great items. This is our big fundraiser for the end of the year. So if you want to sponsor, if you want to buy meals, you can go pick up a meal from Pardini's, or if you're a big-time sponsor, heck, we'll even deliver the meals to your house. Again, go to rtlcc.org for all of that information. For any of you who want to support us. All right, Jonathan. This segment has about 4.5 minutes left in it. We're going to put the whole history of Christianity on abortion into this 4.5 minutes.
We can do that.
We have this pastor who's running for Senate in Georgia is going around saying, "I'm a pro-choice pastor. I'm a pro-choice pastor," and people are defending him by saying, "Well, the Bible says nothing about abortion." And in the last segment, we showed actually, yeah, the Bible has a lot to say about abortion if you have more than 2 brain cells. Beyond the Bible itself, though, and maybe this is getting me into a little bit of Catholic stuff, but I think it's relevant for all of us, understand that the entire history of Christianity has been one of morally opposing abortion. All right? If you go back to the 1st century AD, there's this document called the Didache. It was written in Greek. And it was written during the lifetime of the 12 apostles. And it basically gives a nice little summary of what the early Christian church believed on a whole number of things. And it specified that the early church opposed abortion, that it opposed contraception, it opposed abortion, it opposed infanticide. Now, in that time, abortion was not easy to do in the sense of being safe for the mother in any way, shape, or form, because basically you'd either have to do some kind of crude surgery, which leaves you wide open to infection, or give the woman some kind of poison that'll
potentially harm her
kill
as
the
well.
baby, but maybe to harm her, or some kind of hurt, injuring the woman to induce a miscarriage, which is super dangerous also. Yeah. So abortion wasn't the most common form of birth control. A more common form of birth control was called exposure, where you would just have the baby and leave the baby in the woods somewhere just to die or whatever.
Infanticide.
So infanticide, which is why the Didache mentions we don't like abortion, we don't like contraception, and we don't like infanticide. Now, the whole history of the church was opposed to abortion. Now, the problem was the church wasn't Christianity as a whole was never sure if abortion was a late form of contraception, which would be immoral, but not necessarily homicide, or if it was an early form of homicide. And so you had people going off of the Greek philosopher Aristotle and saying, well, human life doesn't actually begin in the womb, we think, until like 40 or 80 days after conception. Maybe human life doesn't actually begin in the womb until you can feel the baby kicking. But at no point were Christians like, yep, abortion, totally cool. No, they always thought it was either immoral as a form of contraception or that it was homicide. And in the 19th century, when we, as a species, discovered when mammal life begins, i.e. when an egg and a sperm come together, you have that's the sound effect.
Folks, ask your parents what that means.
Ask your parents what that sound. Oh, geez, Louise. Well, now it's on tape, Jonathan.
There you go.
Or whatever the digital equivalent is.
Do your daughters listen to this and your son listen to this?
Well, they're not going to listen to this one, I'll tell you that much. Once the egg and the sperm meet, you have a new human organism, alive from the moment of conception. And it was in the middle of the 19th century that both religious bodies, such as the Catholic Church, clarified their teaching on abortion. It was in the 19th century, the Catholic Church instituted its penalty of excommunication for people who engage in procured abortion. it was in the 19th century that the various American states all passed their laws codifying and clarifying that abortion is illegal except to save the mother's life. It was all in response to these scientific developments about when human life actually begins in the womb. So the whole history of Christianity goes against this contention of, well, the word abortion isn't anywhere in the Bible. Jesus didn't say anything about abortion. Therefore, abortion's okay. Which I guess you could argue the exact opposite way, that, Jesus didn't say anything about abortion, therefore don't do it.
Yeah, that's probably a reasonable assumption.
I mean, it's just as reasonable as saying go for it if Jesus didn't talk about it. So, at any rate. Now, when we come back, we're going to turn to more topical topics. We're going to look at the election results and some of the stuff Joe Biden has promised to do, how he's going to sue the Little Sisters of the Poor. That is next on Right to Life Radio. In the words of Rush Limbaugh, hi, how are you? Right to Life Radio. Jonathan Keller and John Gerardi here with you. Thank you so much. Again, rtlcc.org if you want to support us and our work. All right. Well, Jonathan, by the way, get home before 10 p.m. tonight. Just FYI, now that Gavin Newsom's curfew is in effect. And just to be clear, the curfew is only in effect unless you're going to the French Laundry.
That's right.
For a very swanky dinner with a bunch of lobbyists. So just want to make that clear. The rules are very consistent for all of you little people.
And Tom McClintock, Congressman.
This is getting off the rails, but go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, Congressman Tom McClintock, when all this was being announced, he said, "Hey, are you a major Democratic donor or a lobbyist for a government union?
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, you're exempt from Governor Newsom's lockdown rules."
Yeah, of course. Anyway, all right. Anyway, enough of the local commentary.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I want to talk about Joe Biden. This guy, Joe Biden. Some of you may have heard of him. As of right now, it looks as though he's going to be elected president of the United States. That he has been elected president of the United States.
Now he will be inaugurated,
and that he will be inaugurated on January 20th. Now, I understand. I probably ticked some people off by being mean to Rudy Giuliani. I apologize for that earlier in the show. I'm just saying that basically the Trump campaign amended their lawsuit in Pennsylvania such that, like, they're now only challenging a smaller number of votes than Biden currently has a lead in. So it's, like, mathematically impossible for Trump to actually win Pennsylvania. And if he can't win Pennsylvania, he needs to win Pennsylvania in 2 other states. So if he can't win Pennsylvania, he can't win the election. So based on that, which is just my legal analysis and my crunching of the math, I think it's highly likely that Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated on January 20th. Now, what are the things that Joe Biden has said he would do if he were elected president? One of the things he said he would do, which I don't think we talked about quite as much last week, and I want to dig into it this week with you, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
He promised that he would continue the lawsuits against the Little Sisters of the Poor. I always like to sue Catholic nuns when I start a new job. That's my thing.
You know, I mean, even if you were not devoutly Catholic, John, even if you were mildly superstitious,
that's really all you need to say. Maybe suing nuns is a bad idea.
You know, I'm just saying.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little
stitious.
stitious. There you go, Michael Scott. Boy, that was the most 30-something-year-old white guy moment
right.
we've had on this
That's
show
right.
in a long time, doing The Office.
That's right.
Saying jokes from The Office. All right. So what did Joe Biden say? All right. The Little Sisters of the Poor have been embroiled in lawsuits for the last 7 or so years. And the Little Sisters of the Poor are an order of Catholic nuns. They do wonderful work helping serve poor people, including elderly poor people. They run a lot of nursing homes all over the country. They have a couple of foundations spread out all over the country. And they have become sort of the lead plaintiffs, the front and center plaintiffs, because some very smart lawyers thought, hey, you know who would be a really effective front and center plaintiff in front of all the cameras? This adorable little order of Catholic nuns who just help poor people. They have been the lead plaintiffs in a number of lawsuits challenging a 2012 regulation from the Obama Department of Health and Human Services, the so-called Hhs Mandate. And the Hhs Mandate basically said that as it applies to the Little Sisters of the Poor, said every nonprofit organization that has an employer-based health insurance plan, including religious nonprofits, has to provide coverage for contraception, which includes so-called contraception, which is really abortifacient in nature. So the Little Sisters of the Poor, for their employer-based plan. And I do want to clarify, the Little Sisters of the Poor, on their employer-based healthcare plan, it's not all nuns.
Right.
They do have some lay employees who
Sure.
work with them, with their various foundations and things.
Well,
they
John-
have some lay people who work for them, but many of the people on the plan are nuns. But all of the people who work for them, as far as I know, are Catholic. And the Little Sisters have made the point that, hey, you're forcing us to subsidize stuff that we morally object to as Catholics.
Well, I would say, John, that, look, whenever I was applying for a job with a religious organization, chief among my priorities was to make sure that I could still take their health care policy and flagrantly violate the tenets of that organization.
Right, exactly.
That's
exactly.
pretty important.
Yeah, force
in
them
looking for
to
employment.
contribute directly to something that they
Yeah.
morally oppose. Now, the Little Sisters have been embroiled, as I say, in lawsuits over this question for the last 7 years. Now, other kinds of entities have obtained the necessary relief that they have sought from having to comply with this order. So the most significant of them is Hobby Lobby, which was suing basically as a closely held for-profit business. And they got a Supreme Court ruling in their favor saying that if you're a closely held corporation and so, by the way, for those who don't know, a closely held corporation basically means it's a corporation that's owned only by a small number of people. It's not like a publicly traded organization. All right, so I don't know, think of Apple, for example. Apple is owned by its shareholders, and you or I, Jonathan, could call up a broker and buy some shares of Apple
That's
stock.
not closely held.
Yeah, that's not a closely held
Same thing
corporation.
with
That's
Tesla
that's a
or-
publicly traded
Yeah.
corporation. Okay. Hobby Lobby, on the other hand, I can't call my broker and say, hey, buy me some shares of Hobby Lobby stock, because it's owned by basically it's one family that owns Hobby Lobby, the Green family. So it's not a publicly traded corporation. It's a closely held corporation. The Supreme Court basically ruled for the Hobby Lobby folks that closely held corporations whose owners have these strongly held religious viewpoints, that it is a violation of their rights to free exercise of religion to force them to pay for abortion or abortifacient contraception, what have you, in their employer-based health insurance plans.
And in a narrow ruling, the Supreme Court agreed with that and said,
right.
yeah.
And so that was the Supreme Court ruling. It was a 5-4 ruling. As we asked the producer there if we're still on the air. We're still on the air. All right, very good. All right, just some stuff was happening, folks. Don't worry about it. So that was the ruling we got, and that was a great ruling in the Hobby Lobby case. But that only applied to these closely held corporations. And then the question arises, well, does the same principle apply to religious nonprofits? Now, the Little Sisters of the Poor, I think, were the victims of a lot of bad timing and bad luck. At one point, their case got to the Supreme Court when there were only 8 justices on the court, and Antonin Scalia had just passed away. So they could only get a kind of 4-4 thing, basically giving them temporary relief. And then this time they go to the Supreme Court, and the grounds for the lawsuit are a little different because the Trump administration wasn't enforcing this provision of the HHS mandate, but a bunch of states were challenging it and saying you can't. A bunch of state governments were saying that the federal government couldn't remove this mandate. Well, the Supreme Court only gave the Little Sisters of the Poor this past June a very temporary reprieve, basically sending the case back down rather than resolving. Basically, they didn't want to resolve the fundamental question, which is it a violation of both the First Amendment and this law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act? Is it a violation of the law for the federal government to force these nuns and other similarly situated religious nonprofits to purchase health insurance, to purchase these specific things that violate their conscientious beliefs as part of their employer-based health insurance plans?
So let me ask you this.
Okay.
I realize that we talked earlier about some of the difficulties potentially moving forward of the next few years for pro-life advocates under a Biden administration.
Right.
But John,
Yeah.
is it possible? We're looking at some silver linings here because we don't want to keep,
I think I know what you're
our
about
audience.
to ask me. Is Biden going to shoot himself in the foot by really trying to push this lawsuit?
And specifically because, folks, let's just brass tacks here, okay? Let's just be honest. John, I don't think it's a partisan thing to say that President Trump is not everybody's cup of tea.
He is not.
I think it's fair to say that he's not even some Republicans' cup of tea.
Some of the election results, if you believe them, would indicate that.
Perhaps it might even be appropriate to say that one John G. Roberts Jr., the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States.
He was definitely not John Roberts' cup of tea. That much is very certain.
So, John, is it possible that now with under a President Biden, John Roberts may be less deferential. He may be more skeptical and more willing to rule on some of these issues on a more conservative bent.
I think that is highly likely.
And given the fact that now you have the 3-initialed RGB or RBG.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg is
Replaced
gone,
by ACB.
replaced by Amy Coney Barrett.
That combination of factors, could this actually be again, folks, don't take us the wrong way, not saying that we're happy that Joe Biden is the president-elect, but could this be a hidden silver lining potentially for Little Sisters of the Poor and for other types of cases like that?
I definitely think so. I mean, one thing I'll note, John Roberts ruled the right way in the Hobby Lobby case.
Right.
That's one thing we should note to his credit. And in fact, the only time John Roberts has only had one case where he actually ruled the wrong way on the merits of an abortion case, which was unfortunately this past June with June Medical. But I think the point we raise is they managed to get a successful resolution of Hobby Lobby's situation with a 5-4 Supreme Court that included such luminaries as Anthony Kennedy ruling in the correct fashion with the majority. Well, Kennedy has been replaced with Brett Kavanaugh, who is, whatever you want to say about him, is more conservative than Anthony Kennedy. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been replaced by Amy Coney Barrett, who is much more conservative than Amy Coney Barrett. And I think on this issue, on the question of religious liberty, if anything, actually, Neil Gorsuch is better than Antonin Scalia. As hard as that is to believe, Antonin Scalia had some kind of dicey decisions.
He was one great
failure
of Employment Division versus Smith.
Exactly. So, if anything, if I were Biden, now I'm putting myself in the shoes of a very pro-choice politician. If I were Biden and I wanted the HHS mandate to stand, I actually would not prosecute this case against the Little Sisters of the Poor because I think he's setting himself up for a big loss. I think with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, they're not. I think a lot of members of the Supreme Court, first of all, are tired of seeing these nuns come up again and again and again in these lawsuits and sort of want a resolution to it. There were a couple of people, I think Clarence Thomas in one of his concurrences was griping that we really should just resolve this controversy now. This is ridiculous that they keep coming up. They're just going to have to come up to the Supreme Court again, in a year or two. And I think that I think there's momentum to end this controversy, and I think there's a strong possibility of a 6-3 smackdown reasserting that, no, the federal government doesn't have the authority to force religious nonprofits who disagree with this, with these provisions, to obey. So if any...
It's possible, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know we're both amateur court watchers, but I know that Justice Roberts, one thing that he has
I'm a
valued...
court watcher. I'm a court watcher. Anyway,
he's
that song is really creepy now that
I don't know
with
if
the passage of it. There's a song called "I'm a Girl Watcher."
Oh wow, yeah, that is kind
I'm
of
a girl
creepy.
watcher. Yeah, there are a lot of these songs from the '60s that, after the passage of time and the Me Too movement, really make you sort of ask some questions. Anyway,
well, in the case of John Roberts, I realized that it would be probably fairly easy to get a 6-3 decision, at least theoretically, with all the Republican appointees. Mm-hmm. But I'm assuming we might even be able to see a 7-2 decision if we could convince the shadow justice,
shadow
Chief Justice Elena Kagan.
Maybe. It's possible. Now that is a thing with Roberts. People have asked the question: is Roberts going to get more conservative or less conservative, or will it matter? Obviously, with Amy Barrett joining the court and replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Roberts is no longer the lone critical fifth swing vote in between the conservatives and the liberals anymore. So how is that going to play out? I think Roberts will probably wind up ruling more often with the conservatives in the majority because it allows him to influence the decisions. Remember, when he's in the majority in a decision, he gets to decide who writes the decision. That's one of the benefits of being the Chief Justice. If he's not in the majority, then it goes to the next most senior justice, which in this case is the most conservative justice on the court, Clarence Thomas. So I think he'd rather decide who writes these opinions rather than let Clarence Thomas decide, or just let Clarence Thomas write it himself. All right. So that's that. Now, when we return, we're going to talk about some other possible moves the Biden administration will make on the abortion front, and whether there's any way to stop them. That's next, right here on Right to Life Radio. All right, Jonathan, as we close out the show, again, we remind people our annual Christmas dinner and auction is Friday, December 4th. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. Go to our website, rtlcc.org, if you want to learn more. You can register for the event. You can register to bid on stuff. We got all kinds of great silent and live auction items, including one of the live auction items. Proud to announce this.
Ooh.
A guest, you get to be a guest co-host for either Right to Life Radio or the John Gerardi Show. So if you want it, that's during the live auction. So if you want to bid some big bucks to hang out with me for an hour and see the prestigious Right to Life of Central California studios or the even more prestigious iHeart studios for the John Gerardi Show, be sure to open up that checkbook and start writing, baby. So anyway, The Right to Life Central California auction, Friday, December 4th. Kopi Soteropoulos will
Hey.
be co-hosting it. Opa. So there you go. That was the least Greek-sounding Opa you've ever heard in your life. But anyway, we love Kopi, and we hope you will all participate in the auction. Or also, as I like to refer to it, for the end of the year, if you want to participate in the Write a Checkathon, that's where you just write us a check. Because, look, we're a nonprofit. We try to do a lot of really good work, and we need money. So if you want to make a donation, it's tax deductible. Send us a check by the end of the year. Think about us in your end-of-year giving. All right, Jonathan. Now, I have a big article that's on rtlcc.org. I hope you'll go there to read it. It's in the blog section, where I do basically a very in-depth analysis. It was basically, what it was? I just looked at our show from the week prior, and I was like, maybe I'll just write an article summarizing that. So that's more or less what I did. Summarizing all of the stuff that Biden has said he wanted to do but can't do during his administration on the abortion front, and all of the stuff that he wants to do and he can do. And among the things that he can do, I want to talk about this just a little bit. There are all kinds of ways in which abortion funding is likely to take place in the first few weeks of the Biden administration, and that's terrible. He's likely to eliminate the so-called Mexico City policy, which basically it prevents the federal government from giving money to foreign NGOs that promote abortion as a form of population control or of family planning. And basically, every Republican administration puts the Mexico City policy into place. Every Democrat administration rescinds the Mexico City policy. So Biden is likely to rescind it and allow money to flow to these foreign NGOs, the chief of which is none other than Planned Parenthood International. Now, so that's really bad. And there are other ways he's going to fund abortion. I think he's going to try to restore Title X funding to Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers. That'll be another $60 million a year that goes to Planned Parenthood. I do, though, think, and we talked about it a little bit last week, it bears repeating. I think the single most significant thing that Biden is going to do as it relates to abortion is to deregulate the abortion pill. I think it's something that isn't talked about enough in pro-life circles. But basically, what this means is, so there are two ways to have abortions. There are surgical abortions, and there is pill abortion, or so-called chemical abortion, or so-called medication abortion, okay?
Yeah.
So for those of you who saw the movie Unplanned, this was one of the two abortions that were shown in that movie. And with a medication abortion, you take one pill in the clinic, mifepristone, which cuts off the baby's food supply. The baby dies in the womb. You take a second pill, misoprostol, to induce miscarriages when you're at home a couple days later. And what the Biden administration is likely going to do, if it follows the advice of its many pro-choice advisors and hangers-on, is going to have the FDA deregulate pill abortion so that you don't have to take that first pill in the clinic. That's the key. If you don't make women take that first pill in the clinic, what's going to happen is women will take a pregnancy test, find out they're pregnant. They will get their cell phone. They will Google abortion. They will download an app, a telemedicine app, probably Planned Parenthood's telemedicine app, and they'll be chatting through a text-based app with a nurse practitioner over the phone to get a prescription for medication abortion. And then they will get medication abortion mailed to their house as simply and conveniently as an Amazon Prime package. And that is the ultimate pro-abortion goal of universal abortion access. This has been the party line for the pro-abortion left for a long time, that abortion should be safe, legal, and universally, quote, accessible. Not safe, legal, and rare. They don't care about it being rare. They want it to be accessible. And with a combination of, if you can't pay for abortion, let's have, say, Medi-Cal pay for your abortion, getting rid of conscience protections. But this, more than anything else, solves the problem that pro-choice people have of what about people who don't live close to abortion clinics? This would completely resolve the problem. And unfortunately, this is all in Biden's hands. So I hope there are ways we can hold this up through legal challenges. But this was one of the things that was at stake in this election, and unfortunately, I don't know that there's much we can do to prevent it. Hopefully, a future administration can roll back those advances, well, so-called advances. That'll do it for us. Right to Life Radio will be back next week, Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Power Talk.